But Marshall's life isn't wholly consumed by the law. I'm on a bateau, a James River flatboat like those that Marshall and a survey team took upriver in 1812. The state of Virginia has commissioned him to see if the James can be linked to the Ohio River by a canal, competing with New York for advantage in establishing Western trade routes.
And when Marshall did his 1812 survey, he did it in September because he wanted to be on the water at the lowest time of the year to see, is this route going to be feasible at its hardest? They're still talking about these United States and not the United States. For the health of the Union, it was imperative to cement political and economic ties with the people of the Midwest.
He's also thinking as a nationalistic Virginian. You know, he wants to benefit Virginia by tying the Union together through Virginia. This connected him with George Washington, who dreamed of such a route years before. It connected him with his father, Thomas, who'd been a surveyor. And it got him away from an election his party was losing and from a war he didn't want America to fight.
First, there had been France and the United States in the quasi-war banging up against each other, and then, of course, the next problem becomes the United States and Britain. The British are intervening with American shipping. It becomes something that seemingly can't be resolved in any way.
Jefferson's fanatical opposition to the British precipitates the War of 1812.
The Federalists are really, really aggressively anti-war. As a party, their identity was partly bound up with the British. They also economically and in every other way felt that it was really important to maintain ties with the British.
Because they strongly oppose the war, Federalists appear unpatriotic, and their national reputation suffers. After the war, the party collapses, but the judiciary is still firmly under John Marshall's control, and another case from what only recently has been the frontier will pit it against the ruling Jeffersonian Republicans.
Dartmouth College was this college that had been set up originally to serve the Indians. The founder was a Yalie who had gone up with a Bible and a drum, and how many gallons of New England rum is the story.
Evolving from a school in Indian country into one of the first colleges in North America, Dartmouth College in Hanover, New Hampshire, becomes another battleground between John Marshall and Thomas Jefferson, no longer in the White House, but still pulling the strings of Republican politics.
Dartmouth College was a haven of Federalists in New Hampshire. New Hampshire, on the other hand, was governed by Republicans, and they did not want Dartmouth College to be a bastion of Federalist thought.
The Republican governor of New Hampshire is William Plumer. William Plumer, how would you characterize him politically?
Well, he used to be a Federalist.
Right.
And after the War of 1812, when the Federalist Party had more or less lost its bona fides and credibility, he converted to Republicanism, and he became a Jeffersonian Democrat. And he saw the college as a political instrument for developing not only his strength as a political figure statewide, but nationally. The state wanted to turn Dartmouth into a public university.
They say we are tired of having this private college training the elite, training our political opponents. Let's dismantle Dartmouth College as it exists, make it into a state university.
And so they pass a law that makes Dartmouth College essentially a public college, no longer a private college, and that places above the Dartmouth trustees a new board that is selected by the state of New Hampshire.
And Dartmouth College v. Woodward is a suit between the old Dartmouth College and the new Dartmouth College.
Who was Woodward? Woodward had been treasurer of Dartmouth College. And he, looking at the new legislation, decided to cooperate. So he agreed to become treasurer of Dartmouth University.
The new Dartmouth University now holds the seal, charter, and college buildings, and the old college wants them back. There's much at stake here. If New Hampshire can so easily take over Dartmouth College, what's to prevent other state governments from taking over other private colleges across the country, like Princeton and Harvard? So how does the lawsuit start?
The trustee said, we're the initial contractual partners, and we refuse to obey the governor's edict.
So the case goes to the New Hampshire Supreme Court, and what do they rule?
They rule in favor of Plumer and...
in favor of the governor?
In favor of the governor. It looked airtight.
The Dartmouth College case is argued by Dartmouth's most famous alumnus, Daniel Webster, who's one of the great lawyers of the time.
Daniel Webster, still in his mid-30s and a budding Federalist politician as well as a lawyer, will use all his intellectual and rhetorical powers to defend his beloved alma mater.
Webster thinks the next step should take it to the Supreme Court in order to have the court decide on whether or not a state has sovereign power to violate conditions of a contract.
Following the example of John Marshall and his fellow justices, I've invited a group of legal scholars to dinner at the Jefferson Hotel in Washington, D.C. to discuss the Dartmouth case.
Dartmouth College is not about opening up higher education.
It's not a vision of an ecumenical vision, right?
And after they heard a case, they would retire to the boarding house and they would discuss the case for a long time.
Have a drink at dinner, and that lubricates the social interaction.
Of the 7 justices now on the court, 5 have been appointed by Republican presidents, including Joseph Story, who becomes like a son to Marshall.
Some of the justices who have been the most effective have been the ones who are able to earn the trust of their colleagues and made colleagues feel comfortable talking with them.
Well, let me be devil's advocate here. Education is very important. I mean, it just is. And so why not open it to all views? What's the matter with that?
Deal's a deal. You had a contract, you had a charter, and you're going to take that one to the bank. I mean, that's what a contract is.
But the point is, the governor of New Hampshire wants to steal the assets of the trustees of Dartmouth College for the people of New Hampshire because he doesn't want to actually appropriate money to build a state university.
He has a lot of support for what it is that he's saying.
Justice Marshall saw that the Supreme Court justices were divided in the case.
It's really a question of,
He wanted to develop this consensus on the case before he pronounced his decision.
So now the court is speaking with supposedly one voice, and in Marshall's case, it was typically an opinion written by himself.
The opinion appears more powerful, more impregnable. It's more authoritative. This was a genius.
And Marshall was able to do this because of his personality.
And it was ever since that day until this day that Supreme Court opinions started to be studied as though they were the law.
He says you can't take a private college and make it public.
He said the question before him was whether the charter was a contract within the meaning of the Contracts Clause of the Constitution.
But that provision was clearly, even Marshall recognizes, it wasn't meant for this kind of situation.
One big problem is, why is the charter a contract? Marshall just announces, as he is wont to do.
Marshall says, we understand it wasn't written for this, but although it might be a rare case, the Contracts Clause applies here. So what he's doing is finding a way to use federal authority to police state authority over contracts.
Marshall doesn't have to work his way through previous precedents, as modern courts do. He gets to make the precedents.
40-yard line, first down, Big Green.
In a landmark ruling, Marshall affirms Webster's argument and holds that Dartmouth's charter is a legal contract protected under the Contracts Clause of the U.S. Constitution. the state of New Hampshire may not unilaterally alter or impair it. Dartmouth would remain a private college and not become a state university. But Marshall's opinion was so much more than a victory for just Dartmouth.
And of course, it was a Magna Carta not just for private colleges and universities, but for private corporations more generally. It helps spur economic development throughout the growing nation.
Again, it's sort of Marshall's vision of what kind of country the Constitution was going to shape, and the importance of contractual agreements. I don't know if he was had a good sense of economics or not, but that became such an important principle in the growth of the country.